Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Marlon Kincaid returned to his peaceful lakeside retreat, he expected birdsong and nostalgia, not a steel gate, smug guards, and a sign claiming his land belonged to a private resort, but they picked the wrong man to steal from. This wasn't a mix-up, it was war, and Marlon came prepared. I hadn't been up to the lake since late autumn. Work had piled up. Winter dragged on longer than usual, and I just hadn't found the time. But that Saturday morning, with the sun finally warming the air and the birds announcing spring like they owned it, I loaded up my truck and set out. That lake wasn't just a property, it was my piece. I'd inherited it in 2002, but I'd known it since I was a kid, fishing off the southern dock with my dad, memorizing every ripple in the water and every stone along the tree line. It was mine in every way that mattered, on paper, in blood, and deep down in my bones. I took the northern access road out of habit, even though I usually used the back path. The gravel was smoother this year, which I found odd. And just before the bend where the birch trees thinned, I saw something that made me slow down and squint. A brand new barrier stretched across the road, a heavy-duty automatic gate with a keypad on the left, and a large wooden sign overhead that read, "Clear Haven Retreat. Private members only." I blinked, then chuckled. Some HOA must have gotten overzealous, I figured. I pulled up to the gate slowly, rolled down my window and leaned out. No button, no buzzer. But before I could even put the truck in park, a man in a Navy uniform with a shiny badge that said Clear Haven Patrol stepped out from a small booth on the side of the gate and walked up to me. He had the posture of a mall cop who thought he was guarding Area 51. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, expression flat. "Yeah," I said, smiling politely. "You can open the gate. I'm heading to my property." And what property would that be? I raised an eyebrow. Lake Marlon, the whole eastern shore, parcel A208, if you want to get bureaucratic about it. He didn't smile. Instead, he tapped something into a tablet strapped to his forearm. "I don't have any Marlon listed in our resident database, because I'm not one of your residents. I'm the owner of the damn lake. Always have been." He straightened up slightly, voice hardening. "This lake is under Clear Haven jurisdiction. Only members with active keycards or scheduled passes may enter." I let out a short laugh. "Jurisdiction? Buddy, I've owned that shoreline for over 20 years. I pay taxes on it every year like clockwork. That jurisdiction line might work on your HOA playground, but not on me." He didn't move. "I'm going to have to ask you to turn around, sir. If you don't have a pass," I interrupted, leaning forward. "Do you know what you're standing on right now? My goddamn driveway." His hand moved to his belt, right next to the radio. "Sir, if you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have to call this in." It wasn't worth escalating. Not yet. I gave him a long look, then shifted into reverse and backed up slowly. My heartbeat had picked up, not from fear, but confusion mixed with fury. What the hell was going on? I turned off onto the older dirt path that led toward the southern side of the lake. I hadn't used it in years, but it was still mine. I knew every bump, every low-hanging branch. As I crested the final ridge, I expected to see my old dock, my rental shed, the weathered picnic shelters I'd built with my own hands. Instead, I saw something else: concrete walkways, freshly painted gazebos with decorative banners, a flagpole flying a white HOA flag, a paved parking lot with stenciled lines, and a massive sign that read, "Welcome to Clear Haven Lakefront, private access only." I parked, sat there, stared. They hadn't just crept over the line. They'd colonized it, rebranded it, rebuilt it like it had never belonged to anyone else. No trace of my wooden boathouse, no old pier, just cold perfection, sterilized and lifeless, with a fake smile nailed to every corner. I stepped out of the truck and walked the perimeter, hands shaking with disbelief more than anger. Where my handmade trail used to wind down to the water, now stood a sleek boardwalk with benches and a laminated map under glass. Not a single mention of private property of Marlon Kincaid. Nothing about historical ownership. Just the Clear Haven logo stamped everywhere like a signature on a stolen painting. I took a deep breath and turned to leave. I wasn't ready to lose my temper, not yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone had made a very expensive mistake. I didn't sleep well that night. My brain wouldn't stop replaying the image of that smug security guard telling me to turn around on my own damn road. I must have stared at the ceiling for hours, trying to convince myself that maybe it was all some absurd misunderstanding, some zoning misprint or miscommunication. But the more I thought about it, the less likely that seemed. No one installs a full gate, security checkpoint, concrete gazebos, and parking lot on accident. That kind of arrogance takes planning, and money, and a complete lack of conscience. By morning, I wasn't just mad. I was determined. I grabbed my backup key set, slipped on an old fishing cap, tossed my coffee thermos into the truck, and headed out again. No GPS this time, no fishing gear. I was going straight through the front. When I pulled up to the gate, the same security guy was already waiting. Like he'd been briefed, like he expected trouble. Only this time he had a partner, taller, younger, wearing mirrored sunglasses like he was auditioning for a SWAT team. They both stepped forward as I stopped. "I told you yesterday," the older one said, tapping his tablet again. "Without an access pass, you're not permitted to enter Clearhaven territory." "Funny," I said, stepping out of the truck slowly, "because I told you yesterday that this isn't your territory. It's mine." "You were warned not to trespass again." I took 2 steps forward, still calm. "You are the one trespassing. This land doesn't belong to Clearhaven, and I can prove it. But first, you're going to let me access my property." The younger guy stepped between us. "Sir, you're escalating the situation." I let out a low breath. "I haven't even started escalating." He reached out and placed a firm hand on my chest, trying to push me back. Instinct took over. I slapped his hand away and stepped forward. He grabbed my arm in response, and I shoved him off with enough force to make him stumble backward. His boot caught the edge of the curb, and he dropped like a sack of bricks, hitting the ground with a loud thump. For a brief moment, everything froze. The older one radioed something in, and before I could even process what had just happened, he barked, "You just assaulted a security officer. Stay where you are." I raised my hands instinctively. He put hands on me first. "Step away from the vehicle now." I glanced at the road behind me, the dense woods on either side, and then back at the gate. There were already 2 cars approaching, marked county cruisers with their lights flashing. I stepped back and leaned against my truck, fists clenched at my sides. The first officer out of the cruiser was a broad-shouldered deputy I didn't recognize. He looked between me and the guards, then at the one on the ground who was now sitting up and rubbing his shoulder dramatically. "What's going on here?" The older guard jumped in. He tried to force his way onto HOA property. Got physical when we stopped him. "My partner fell." "I didn't force anything," I said, keeping my tone steady. "I own the property. These clowns are blocking access to my land and physically stopped me. Do you have proof of ownership with you, sir?" That's when I realized my mistake. Again, no documents, no tax ID, no printed deed in the glove box. I hadn't expected to be arrested for trying to step foot on my own lake. "I have it at home," I said. "This is just a quick check-in. I wasn't planning to get into a bureaucratic turf war today." The deputy didn't look impressed. "And do you have ID?" It was in the truck. I gave it to him, watched as he walked back to the cruiser. A few minutes later, he returned with a notepad and a polite but firm expression. "We're placing you under temporary detainment for investigation of assault and trespassing. You'll be taken to the station and processed. You can provide documentation there." I almost laughed. "You mean to tell me you're arresting the man who owns the lake for trespassing on his own property?" The deputy didn't blink. "At the moment, we only have a complaint, your word, and no documents. You'll have a chance to clarify everything." I looked over at the guards, who were now smirking behind their mirrored lenses. Then I looked back at the lake, just visible through the trees. My lake, my shoreline, my history. I didn't resist when they cuffed me. Didn't say another word as they read me my rights. Didn't even blink when they closed the cruiser door. But in my head, something had clicked. This wasn't just about some HOA getting too ambitious. This was theft. Organized, arrogant, and deliberate. And I'd be damned if I let them get away with it. By the time I got out the next morning, I was running on caffeine fumes, irritation, and a barely restrained urge to sue everyone within a 5-mile radius of that godforsaken gate. The charges were technically still pending investigation, but the sergeant had enough sense to release me after confirming I had no prior incidents and no real reason to run. It helped that I didn't throw a fit. I just sat there in holding all night, mentally replaying the moment that smug security punk said I wasn't in the system. That morning, after a hot shower and a sandwich I could barely taste, I called the only man who would know exactly what kind. of fire to aim at these people. Ellis Jeffers. Ellis had been my father's attorney for decades and had the temper of a courtroom veteran who genuinely enjoyed humiliating idiots. By noon, we were sitting at his desk, documents spread across the table, like evidence for a war crimes tribunal. This, he said, tapping the parcel map with a manicured finger, is your land. This, now the tax statement, proves continuous ownership since 2002. And this. He held up a laminated photo from 2 years back showing my old dock. Makes their concrete monstrosities look real damn illegal. He stood up, already reaching for his coat. Let's go say hello. We drove back to the lake together. This time, I didn't take the north gate. I wanted to come in quiet and hit them hard. We cut through the old back trail, the one I'd cleared by hand a decade ago, now choked with saplings and overgrown brush. I guided Ellis's SUV over roots and rocks until we came up just shy of the eastern bluff. From there, we could see everything. The polished picnic stations, the faux rustic fire pits, the welcome sign carved out of cedar. They'd even installed a flagpole with the Clear Haven logo, as if they were a sovereign state. Ellis whistled. They really put some money into this. With my shoreline. We stepped out, camera gear in hand. Ellis had brought a GoPro rig, his iPhone on a gimbal, and a backup voice recorder. I had the thick envelope of documents, laminated where needed, notarized where possible. No more guessing games. We walked the perimeter, filming everything, every gazebo, every sign, every stenciled curb labeled HOA access parking only. I pointed out where my original structures had stood, gone without a trace. Even the old trail marker I carved into a pine tree had been sawed off. A concrete slab now stood where my dock used to be, fitted with a metal railing and some pre-approved HOA safety signage. I crouched and ran my fingers over the concrete. Fresh, probably poured no more than a month ago. No permits, no calls, no consultation, just poured and claimed like they had every right. Get all of it, I told Ellis. Every screw, every plank. I want it all on the record. We were about halfway along the lakefront when the guard reappeared. Same one from day one. Balding, smug, probably smelling himself in the mirror each morning. He stopped mid-step when he saw Ellis's gear and my folder. You again, he said. I warned you. Ellis cut him off with a calm, firm voice. We're conducting a legal inspection of private property. Do not interfere. You are currently being recorded. The guy's demeanor shifted. He took a step back, glanced at the camera, then pulled his radio up like it was a security blanket. Let's not escalate, he muttered. We have procedures. You'll need more than procedures to explain this mess in court, Ellis replied. 10 minutes later, another cruiser arrived, same deputy as last time. He climbed out of the car slower this time, like he already regretted being there. I thought we'd settled this, he said. No, I replied. You settled on arresting a man without checking a single fact. Now I've got documents, photos, a certified property map, and 20 years of tax records, so unless you'd like to repeat yesterday's mistake on camera, I suggest you listen. Ellis handed him the documents. The deputy flipped through them, slower than I liked, but he didn't argue. His eyebrows rose at the survey maps, dipped again at the photos of my old boathouse, and froze on the tax ledger. He cleared his throat. This does look official, but I'll need to confirm with the county. Please do, Ellis said, and while you're at it, ask them if Clear Haven has filed any permits for lakeside development. That got the deputy's attention. I'll call dispatch. You two stay put. While he was on the radio, Ellis leaned toward me. You realize they've done major structural changes here. If they didn't have permission or ownership, that's not just trespassing. That's felony-level property destruction. I nodded slowly. That's the idea. A few minutes later, the deputy came back with a tight expression. I've got a land services rep en route. She's going to verify this on site. Good, I said, because we're not going anywhere. We stood there together, Ellis still filming, me with the envelope under my arm, the wind picking up off the water. The guard had disappeared back toward his shack. I figured he was trying to decide whether to run or pretend this wasn't happening. But it was happening, and it was only just beginning. The land services rep showed up in a white government-issued Jeep, kicking up dust as she rolled to a stop just past the makeshift HOA welcome kiosk. She stepped out, clipboard in one hand, county ID swinging from a lanyard. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, boots scuffed from actual fieldwork. She looked like she'd seen enough backyard tyrants in her day to recognize trouble before anyone even opened their mouths. Judy Spencer, she said, extending a hand. County Land and Zoning Division. Got a call about a boundary dispute? Ellis stepped forward first, professional and composed. I'm Ellis Jeffers, attorney representing Mr. Marlon Kincaid, owner of the shoreline property in question. She nodded once and turned to me. You're the owner. For over 20 years. I'll need to see your documents. Ellis handed her the folder, and she started flipping through it, eyes scanning survey maps, tax receipts, and dated photos like a machine. After a few minutes, she looked up. This all checks out. Parcel A208, legally subdivided in 1987, transferred to Mr. Kincaid in 2002 via inheritance. No liens, no encumbrances. This is your land. Finally, I muttered, someone who can read. She narrowed her eyes and looked past me at the lake. Then what the hell is all this? Before I could answer, a voice cut through the air like a damn blade. Well, well, if it isn't the provocateur himself. I turned to see her, Karen Blaylock, marching down the paved footpath like it was a runway. Her heels clicked absurdly against the concrete. She wore white slacks, a pastel blouse, and the kind of expression that only someone drunk on power and HOA bylaws could maintain in the face of reality. Behind her came two men I recognized from local contractor trucks, clipboard guys, the kind who measure twice and bill 3 times. Karen Blaylock, she said, offering her hand to Judy, who looked at it but didn't take it. I'm the president of the Clear Haven Retreat Homeowners Association. I assume we're resolving this unfortunate misunderstanding. Judy replied flatly, we're confirming ownership and construction legality. So far, it appears your HOA has developed a large section of land you don't own. Karen's smile didn't budge, but her eyes sharpened. That's not accurate. This lake and its surroundings were historically classified as non-allocated green space. When our HOA formed last year, we worked with the local land committee to rezone it as a community enhancement area. There was no legal owner on record at the time. Ellis stepped in like a loaded spring. That's a lie. Karen turned toward him. Excuse me. We've just presented Judy with legal proof of ownership, chain of title, tax history, everything. There was never a lapse. This land was never up for reallocation. So unless you're implying someone in the zoning board committed fraud, I'd be very careful about what you say next. Karen's voice rose an octave, but her smile stayed frozen. Mr. Kincaid has been absent for years. The property was derelict. Dangerous even. As president, it was my duty to ensure the safety and beauty of our community. You demolished a dock, I snapped, ripped out picnic shelters I built with my father, cut down trees, and poured concrete into a shoreline you don't own. We improved. You destroyed it. Judy raised a hand, cutting through the tension. Mrs. Blaylock, do you have any documentation to support your claim of ownership? Karen pulled out a glossy folder from her handbag, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Right here, rezoning authorization, parcel overlays, community improvement contracts, all approved by our board, and a signed memo from zoning committee chairperson Alan Brewster. Judy took the folder, flipping through it with a kind of skepticism that made me like her even more. After about a minute, she paused. This isn't an official parcel map. This is a community brochure, and this overlay is photoshopped. Karen stiffened. That's not true. That's the current version our board uses. Where's the official zoning stamp? Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. Judy handed the folder back. None of this is legally valid. This doesn't match county GIS data or archived records. This development is unauthorized. Karen's tone cracked for the first time. This is outrageous. That man is trying to sabotage community progress. We've invested thousands into making this a safe, beautiful space. And now he shows up with some lawyer and a grudge? Ellis smiled coldly. We're not here with a grudge. We're here with deeds. Karen stepped closer, lowering her voice, trying to regain control. You're not even part of our community, Mr. Kincaid. That's the point, I said. I never asked to be. The deputy returned from his cruiser, glancing between Judy, Karen, and us. We're going to need to secure this site. I've just been told someone from the environmental department is also on their way. They've got concerns about tree removal near a protected watershed. Karen's jaw dropped. You've got to be kidding me. No, ma'am, he replied. I'm not. She turned on her heel and stormed back toward her shiny little pavilion, muttering something about lawsuits and entitled men with an axe to grind. Ellis leaned toward me. We just cracked the dam. The environmental officer arrived 40 minutes later, driving a beat-up forest green state truck with mud on the fenders and a bumper sticker that said, "Keep Virginia Wild." His name was Brian Mulholland, clipboard in one hand and a rolled-up topographic survey in the other. He had that quiet, outdoorsy demeanor that made you think twice before trying to bullshit him. After quick introductions, Judy handed over our documents, and Brian unfolded the map right there on the hood of his truck. "Parcel A208, he muttered. "Eastern shoreline, part of the Stone Ridge Aquifer Zone, riparian buffer zone marked as protected in '09. He glanced up at me. "You aware of that designation? I've kept the place clean, never built anything permanent near the water. No pesticides, no lawn treatment, no shoreline grading. I let nature do her thing." "Looks like you did everything right," he said, then turned toward the lake. Until somebody else came along. Brian started walking the shoreline with us and Judy, snapping photos, taking notes. When we got to the concrete gazebo near the waterline, the one where my old fishing dock used to be, he stopped cold. "This is bad," he said. "There used to be a soft bank here, natural runoff slope. They filled it with crushed gravel, poured a slab, and installed metal support anchors directly into the shoreline. That's a clear violation." He crouched by the edge and pointed at something near the base of the slab. "And that's filter fabric sticking out. They tried to fake erosion control." Judy leaned in. "Is it illegal?" Brian nodded. "In a protected riparian zone? Absolutely. You can't just hardscape a shoreline without permits. And even then, there's a process." We kept walking, reaching the North Cove where 3 tall pines used to stand. Now there was just a mulched area with decorative boulders and a sign reading HOA reflection point. Brian's voice lowered. "They cut those trees." I nodded. "They'd been there since I was a teenager." He glanced at Judy. "Protected native growth. Over 50 years old. Should have been flagged before any clearing." Judy frowned. This just got a lot worse. Karen reappeared just in time, flanked by the same 2 clipboard contractors from earlier. She'd changed into flats and sunglasses, but she still carried that brittle energy, like a wine glass under too much pressure. "Excuse me," she said, voice syrupy sweet. "Is there a problem?" Brian straightened. "Who authorized the removal of shoreline trees and installation of hardscape on a protected aquifer zone?" Karen blinked. "The HOA board voted on it. We filed plans with the Architectural Review Committee and followed landscaping guidelines." Judy stepped in, voice firm. "Your so-called board has no legal jurisdiction over this property. You've constructed unauthorized developments on private land inside a state-monitored watershed using unpermitted materials." Karen's mask cracked. "We were told the land had no active title, that it was unmanaged." We were doing the county a favor. Brian was already pulling out a yellow tag from his pouch. "Favor or not, these structures are now under violation. They're subject to removal and fines, effective immediately." Karen's face went pale. "You can't do that." Ellis raised an eyebrow. "You're going to want to stop saying what people can and can't do." One of the contractors stepped forward, clearly nervous. "We were just following orders. Mrs. Blaylock said everything was approved." "That's funny," I said, "because I've been the only one paying taxes on this lake for 2 decades, and I sure as hell didn't approve a damn thing." Brian posted the violation notice directly on the concrete pillar of the gazebo, bright yellow and impossible to miss. Karen tried to grab it down, but Judy stopped her. "Interfering with a state-issued citation is a criminal offense." Karen looked around like a cornered animal. "I have rights. We all have rights. This man abandoned the land for years." "I own a house 30 minutes away," I said. "Not Mars." The deputy, who had wisely been hanging back for most of the exchange, finally stepped forward. "We're going to need statements from everyone here. And, Mrs. Blaylock, I'm going to ask you not to leave the premises." Karen's hands tightened into fists. "This is harassment." "No," Ellis said calmly. "This is the law finally catching up." We gave our statements as the sun started to dip behind the trees. Contractors left quietly. HOA banners began to look more like flags of surrender. I watched Brian take water samples and photograph the ruined tree stumps, methodical as a man assembling a case. And when we finally wrapped, Judy turned to me and said, "I'm filing a full report with the zoning office. This could trigger a fraud investigation." I nodded, staring out at the water that no longer looked like mine, but that I now knew I would take back, inch by inch, if I had to. By the time we got back to Ellis's car, my hands were shaking. Not from fear. That had drained out of me somewhere around the moment Brian stapled the yellow violation to my old dock post, but from sheer rage and disbelief. 20 years. 20 goddamn years of paying taxes, maintaining the shoreline, renting out kayaks in the summer, and now I had to sit here and prove I wasn't the trespasser. Ellis handed me a bottle of water and said nothing, which was the right move. He knew I wasn't ready to speak. Not yet. That silence didn't last long. A county cruiser pulled up beside us, this time with 2 officers. Not the same deputy from earlier. These were from Central Dispatch. The one behind the wheel leaned out the window. Mr. Kincaid. Yeah? Could you come with us, sir? Ellis stepped forward immediately. On what grounds? The officer got out and looked at his notes. We've had a report of physical aggression during a prior incident. A private security guard filed a complaint last week, claims he was shoved while trying to secure the premises. I stared at him, slack-jawed. You mean the rent-a-cop who grabbed my arm and tried to throw me off my own land? We're not passing judgment, sir, just following up. Ellis pulled out his phone and opened the video app. My client has time-stamped footage of that entire exchange. Your department already responded and failed to arrest the actual aggressor. Are you planning to escalate based on a retaliatory complaint from a private security firm hired by an organization now under investigation? The second officer hesitated. We're just here to ask questions. Karen stormed into view from the pavilion, clearly summoned by radio or some HOA bat signal. Her expression was a melting cocktail of fury, panic, and desperation. And, for the first time, a flicker of fear. You're arresting him, right? She barked. He's violent. He assaulted our guard. He's been harassing us all day. The officer kept his tone even. Ma'am, we're still determining what happened. We're not making any arrests at this time. Karen pointed at me, dramatic as a church play. This is favoritism. He doesn't even live here. Ellis stepped forward, calm and cold. He's the property owner. You, on the other hand, are about 30 minutes away from a formal fraud charge, according to the zoning officer's report. Karen snapped. I'm the elected president of Clear Haven Retreat. I represent over 200 homeowners. You will not speak to me like I'm some criminal. Brian, who had walked over without anyone noticing, replied dryly, Funny. Because from where I'm standing, that's exactly what the paperwork says. Karen's entire body locked up. She turned toward Judy, who had remained near the lake with her phone, possibly talking to someone at the county office. Karen called out, sharp and shrill, Judy, you know this isn't fair. You know how things really work. Judy hung up and walked back slowly. Karen, I just got off the phone with county legal. They're flagging your overlay maps for forgery and starting an audit into the land committee records. If you want to speak to them, I suggest you do it with a lawyer present. Karen visibly blanched. Then she did what every overconfident tyrant does when cornered. She tried to bluff her way out. I have contacts, she snapped. I'm friends with Councilman Fenton. I helped raise funding for the district water project. You think this is going to stick? Ellis didn't even blink. Then maybe he can join you at the deposition. She whirled around to the 2 HOA board members who had been standing awkwardly near the new pergola all day, hoping to remain invisible. Are you seriously just going to stand there? One of them, a wiry man with a neck sunburn, cleared his throat. Karen, we didn't sign off on concrete structures. We just wanted a walking trail. Karen's voice cracked like glass under pressure. Cowards. It was unraveling fast now. Brian had documented everything. Judy was calling in enforcement. The officers weren't buying her story. And me? I stood still and watched the mighty HOA empire of Clear Haven Retreat buckle under the weight of its own arrogance. The officer turned back to me. Sir, you're free to go. We're going to write this up and attach the footage to the case file. If the HOA continues to press false charges, it may be considered malicious prosecution. Ellis handed him a copy of the video and our statement on a USB. This should cover it. Karen stood frozen, jaw clenched, fingers twitching. I could see it in her face. This wasn't supposed to happen. People were supposed to back down when she barked. They were supposed to listen when she said she knew someone. And now, all she had left were empty threats and crumbling lies. I got in the car and shut the door quietly. Ellis followed, settling into the passenger seat. She's not going to walk away from this, he said. No, I replied. She's going to be dragged. The next 48 hours were a swirl of paperwork, phone calls, and unexpected knocks at the door. Ellis and I spent most of that time assembling a bulletproof timeline. Every tax bill, every water use permit, every seasonal rental agreement. We laid it all out like a murder board in a detective movie. Ellis even dug up an old environmental grant application I'd submitted in 2010 for shoreline preservation. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. By Wednesday morning, Judy called. "Marlon," she said, voice clipped and urgent. "You might want to get down here." When we arrived at the zoning office, the reception area was crawling with activity. 2 local news vans were parked outside, their camera guys leaning on tripods, bored and squinting at the morning sun. Inside, a small crowd of residents had gathered, some Clear Haven homeowners, others from the older neighborhood by the southern road. A few even nodded at me like I'd just won a round in a boxing match. Karen was already there, standing in front of the counter with a look like she'd just bitten into a lemon dipped in vinegar. 2 county investigators flanked her, one holding a fat envelope sealed with an official stamp. Judy waved us over. Audit team finished the overlay comparison this morning. The parcel data submitted by the HOA contains 5 altered maps. 3 of them have mismatched zoning codes. One includes a fabricated easement that never existed. Ellis gave a low whistle. "That's not sloppy. That's deliberate." Judy nodded. They also traced the submission to a clerk named Holland. He pushed it through after hours last fall, got a transfer bonus 2 weeks later. "Bribery," I muttered. "Looks like it," she said. And here's the kicker. The HOA used those fake maps to apply for a county beautification grant, which means there's now federal money involved. Karen spun around, her eyes locked on Judy. "You have no idea what you're doing. This will tear the community apart." Judy didn't even flinch. "You did that when you lied about who owned the land." The 2 investigators stepped forward. "Mrs. Blaylock, we're placing you under arrest for submitting falsified documents, unlawful development on private property, and attempted procurement of federal funds through fraudulent means. You have the right to remain silent." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. For a moment, the room held still. Then one of the older residents, a woman I vaguely remembered from church picnics years ago, let out a quiet, victorious "humph." The officers cuffed Karen and led her out the front door as the news crews scrambled to get shots. Ellis nudged me. "Bet she's regretting that press release now." While Karen was being loaded into the cruiser, the county investigator turned to Ellis. "Your client can expect a letter from the civil courts. There's restitution involved. Damage to protected shoreline, destroyed assets, loss of income, defamation. It adds up." I nodded slowly. "That's fine. I want every single one of them on record." Later that afternoon, back at the lake, I walked the shoreline again. The yellow violation tag still fluttered in the wind. The fake HOA signs had been taken down by order of the county. A crew from zoning had already cordoned off the north path. Survey tape wrapped around the posts like a crime scene. Which, frankly, it was. Ellis pulled out a rolled-up map from his trunk. I had a copy made of the original 2002 parcel boundary, just so there's no confusion going forward. I took it from him and unrolled it slowly across the tailgate. There it was. Every inch, every slope, every tree line I remembered from childhood. No fake roads, no phantom trails, just the land the way it always had been. We stood in silence for a while until a voice called out from the woods. It was Kevin, a local teen I'd hired in past summers to help with kayak rentals. He was holding a folded camp chair and a cooler. "Hey, Mr. Kincaid, that job offer from last year still open?" I laughed. "You still know how to tie off a canoe? Better than anyone in town. Then you're hired." The shoreline might have been scarred and battered, but it was mine again. And now it was time to remind the town what it really looked like. Not from a drone or a map, but from the water, the fire pit, the dock at sunset. I was home. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. Not in temperature. The AC worked fine, but in tone. No small talk, no courtroom dramas, just paperwork, murmured directives, and the steady thump of a bailiff's boots on tile. Karen sat at the defense table looking like a wilted pageant queen. Blazer too stiff, lipstick slightly cracked, eyes darting everywhere but at me. To her right were 2 other board members from Clear Haven, now co-defendants. One looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The other was already crying. Across from them sat Ellis, calm as always, flanked by a junior associate with an overstuffed binder and a laser pointer. I sat behind them in the plaintiff's section, a legal pad in hand, not because I needed to take notes, but because after everything that happened, I still couldn't trust a single word not written down in ink. The charges were read quickly. Fraud, document forgery, unauthorized development on private land, environmental violation, malicious prosecution, obstruction of justice, the works. Karen tried to act unfazed, but when the judge denied her request for dismissal, I saw her knuckles go white on the armrest. The case didn't take long. We had video evidence, original deeds, tax records, expert witnesses from the zoning office and the environmental board. Ellis played it all like a symphony. Every time Karen's lawyer tried to cast doubt, he'd quietly lay another document on the table or play another clip. The security footage from the day I was arrested was damning, especially when the guard who filed the complaint had since changed his statement and signed a cooperation agreement. By the end of the third day, it was clear which way this was going. The judge scheduled sentencing for the following week. Karen was released on bond, but her face looked like she knew the handcuffs would be back soon, this time for good. When the gavel finally dropped, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something deeper, a quiet satisfaction. Not just for me, but for every person who's ever been told they're trespassing on their own land. For every time someone in a blazer and a smug smile thought paperwork could erase memory, or fences could rewrite ownership. A month later, I returned to the lake for the first full weekend of summer. This time, I wasn't alone. Kevin had brought 2 friends to help him clean up the last of the debris. The new signpost was up, a thick cedar slab bolted into concrete, lacquered against the elements. It read, "Private lake property, admission, $5 for visitors, $40 for Clear Haven residents, cash only." The Southern Trail was open again. The old canoe dock had been sanded and resealed. I'd even rebuilt one of the picnic gazebos using the leftover boards from the illegal pergola. Waste not, want not. One afternoon, I saw a couple walking hesitantly along the gravel road near the north entrance, clearly from Clear Haven. Matching polos. HOA vibe. I met them halfway. "Afternoon," the man said cautiously. "We heard you're open to the public now?" I smiled. "Sure. $5 a head. 40 for you folks." The woman squinted. "Why the difference?" "Consider it a late fee," I said. 2 decades overdue." They looked at each other, laughed nervously, and paid. They stayed for hours, fished, took photos, even helped Kevin carry a cooler. By sundown, the lake had that old feeling again, laughter, water lapping against kayaks, the smell of smoke from a responsible fire pit, life returning. As I stood near the edge, watching the reflection of the treetops ripple with the breeze, I couldn't help but think, they tried to take this place from me. They thought paperwork and pressure could bury memory, could replace sweat equity with fake maps and charm offensives. But land remembers, and so do I.